Hello, greetings everybody. I want to welcome you here to Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. So first off, kind of cold today. Been cold for a few days. Not been much of a spring so far. However, the show must go on. So we're doing the part B of the episode of Explore the Prog Verse with Hawkwind. I'm sorry, this was supposed to come out last night at 11, but yesterday was a bit chaotic, too many things to do, and just couldn't get to the making of the video that we're doing now. So as soon as I make this, I will decide where to fit this in, because this week will come out first. The other episode, the last episode of the mini-series, is already gone out this morning. And then this week will also come out, and we also have an episode of the final episode of the mini-series for the drummers, which will come out later. So I may space this in between the two, between this week and that episode, so maybe around 4 o'clock, so that we're not bunched up on top of each other. As it is, it should have come out last night. It didn't, and I do apologize for that. So I've also decided that this is going to be a three-parter. Their discography is just ginormous and is taking up a lot of time. I've done the first episode, of course, which was 12 albums plus a little bit of the prehistory of the band. And this episode will feature 11 of the next 11 albums, and then the last part C will be of the final 11 albums by them. Now, I'm not going to be doing anything on the live albums, for which they have an absolute plethora of, and compilations as well. So anyways, without further ado, we're going to get into the albums. So there's like 11 albums here, ranging from 1985, I think it's up to about 2005. So about a 20-year period, they put out 11 albums, plus a horde of live albums, maybe as many as 15 or so in that time period. Lots of stuff. So I will try, if I remember, I will mention some of the live albums that were come out at that time, during that time period too. So we're going to get into it. So today's episode, of course, is on Hawkwind. This is part B of Exploring the Prog Universe. Okay, so the first album we're going to talk about is called The Chronicles of the Black Sword, which came out in 1985. It was released actually November the 11th, 1985. And on the album, of course, was Brock Langton, Bainbridge, Alan Davies on bass, and Danny Thomas on the drums, and also Dave Charles on percussion. So a fairly 6 members in the band, all of them producing fairly good stuff as well. This is a keyboard-dominated album, more so than some of the predecessors, but definitely dominated by keyboards. Some very good guitar, really beefy at times, actually. Lots of spacey sounds, so none of these things are abnormal for Hawkwind. I found on this album that they had a little bit of that East Indian sound on some of the tracks, as well as of course being what they call it, symphonic in nature as well. So they have this song, one catchy pop. It's kind of a catchy pop heavy track that I liked quite a bit, called Needle Gun, and this, of course, is one of their studio albums. So this studio album, I think I numbered it. Yeah, I numbered. This is their 14th studio album at this point in 1985. They started in 1970, so that's pretty close to an album a year. They also had 4 or 5 other albums that included both live and collections and stuff like that. There's about 4 or 5 of them released between the previous album, which was Choose Your Mask, and the current album, and this album, which was Chronicles of the Black Sword. Yeah, so lots of stuff going on for them. Never a period where they're not doing something. So the next album that came out about 3 years later, which is called the Exxon Codex, released April the 25th, 1988. Again, Brock, Bainbridge, Langton, Davies, and Thompson on this album as well. Another spacey, heavy album. Pretty atypical of a Hawkwind band. Lots of that space effect sounds. Lots of chronicles of heavy and proggy stuff on this album as well. And there's some odd noises, some horse noises actually. I remember the horse noises on this album. A lot electronic sounding. Yeah, I found this to be a little bit quicker in sound, if that makes sense. Like it's a little bit more sped up than the previous album, and there's quite a bit of that spoken narrative that Hawkwind is known for. And this is one of the albums I think that it's more noted on. So at this point in time, between this album and the Chronicles of the Black Sword, they also had 2 or 3 more compilations and lives that were released between the 14th and 15th studio album, which this one is. So again, over this so from 1982 to 1988 they made 3 studio albums, but they also put out about 8 live and compilation albums. So that's like 11 albums over a 6-year period. So prolific as hell, this band. Very prolific. The next album out is called Space Bandits, released September 24th, 1990. So a couple years have passed here. So you have a female vocalist on this album. Yes, first one, I think. Her name is Bridget Wishart. She does the vocals. Then Brock, Davey, Simon House is on this doing violin, and Bainbridge. And this is the first album to feature Richard Chadwick on drums. And going forth, he is the drummer for them now. So he's been with them since 1990, which is, 34 years. He's been with the band a long time, longer than a lot of musicians are with their own bands that started out with, right? So pretty solid member of the band at that point. This again is very clear, heavy space opening. The female vocals and male vocals in this as well. It's not just the female singing, but there is some male vocals in this as well. Are pretty good. There's a very bit of a narrative part, which is not totally unusual for Hawkwind. It starts to get more as they get more and more, as their albums get closer to the modern times. There's a lot more narrative, I find. Some melodic guitar parts on this, and there is of course some heavy tracks which are very Hawkwind-like on this track. They seem to have a bit of that on most of their albums. Sometimes they'll have different themes. They may have a little bit of this theme or a little bit of that theme, but there's always that heavy, spacey theme throughout most of their albums. Sometimes it's more dominant than other times. On this one, pretty dominant, I think. Then we get to the next album, which is Electric Teepee. This is a kind of a different album from the predecessors. Also, you have 3 more live albums that were released between Space Bandits and Electric Teepee. So Space Bandits is their 16th studio album, and Electric Teepee is their 17th studio album. But they have 3 more live albums between that. So in a 2-year period, they produced 5 albums. So, they just don't slow down. That's the point I'm trying to make. They just keep making stuff. This album, it's got some heavy but kind of funny lyrics in it as well. Brock is pretty much the vocalist here. Of course, I forgot to say, this album was released May the 11th, 1992, with Brock, Davey, and Chadwick being the members of the band only. It's Brock. He has a little bit of that British humor that is known for a lot of British bands. He definitely has that going here. and this of course only has the 3 members. Yeah, a lot of more weird repetitive noises on this, which is not an uncommon trait of Hawkwind. They do like to have noises throughout their album, different sounds. Sometimes they're repetitive. There's a lot more repetitiveness on this particular one than on some of the previous ones. And I found this to be a heavy but pretty normal sounding Hawkwind album. So it's very spacey. It's got that heaviness about it. It's one of the heavier ones, I think. Considered to be, I think, one of their better albums as well. So that's from 1992. The next album out is from 1993. So only a year later, they put out their 18th studio album. This one, it's called "It Is the Business of the Future to Be Dangerous." Yes, kind of a lengthy title, no doubt about it. So again, only the 3 members, Brock, Davey, and Chadwick, on this album. Released October the 25th, 1993. I found this album to be somewhat symphonic, a little bit more symphonic than some of their predecessors. It starts out with this kind of symphonic part to it and just seems to continue through most of the album. Lots of odd noises again, probably more on this album than on Electric TP, which is saying a lot because there's quite a bit on that. It has a little bit of that live sound to it as well. The instrumentation on the album is a pretty strong, I think. A lot of this kind of, okay, how am I going to put this? So there are bits and pieces of this reggae stuff going on this album too, which is not something that you'll hear on any of the predecessing albums. There's a couple of songs here that kind of have a reggae feel to them, which I thought was kind of different for them. But one thing about Hawkwind, they do have a sound that they're consistently putting out throughout almost all their albums. It's more or less dominant a lot of the time, but they do venture off into different genres and try different stuff. They're not afraid to do that, but they don't allow it to take over the entire album, which is good, because I don't think I can handle a full reggae album by them. However, a little bit of reggae thrown in there. Rush done this as well. They throw some reggae in their music on occasion as well. Mostly, and the Police, of course, are all reggae, but are pretty much all reggae. So we move on to the next album, which was released in 1995. This is one of 2 albums released in 95. This one is a little bit different because it doesn't go under the title of Hawkwind. It's under Psychedelic Warriors. It's a Hawkwind album to my way of thinking, but it's under Psychedelic Warriors, and probably for the same reason that they generally do, which is it's a little bit outside of what Hawkwind normally does, so they didn't want to call it a Hawkwind album. That's my guess. The album is called White Zone, released on June the 20th, 1995. Again, Brock, Davey, and Chadwick going here. This is the first of the Warriors album. I believe they have several of them. Somebody can correct me if they want. This is also considered their 20th studio album. It's more of a techno album, and I think that's part of the reason why they didn't want to call it a Hawkwind album. It has a lot of that techno rock sound to it. Not very much guitar at all, and very little vocals. This is a kind of an instrumental album, so hence the reason with it being pretty much all instrumental, very technical, and no guitar, so you don't get that hard sound that you get with Hawkwind. That's, I think, the primary reason why they called it the Psychedelic Warriors, but to me it's still a Hawkwind album. The next album came out the same year, Alien 4, released October the 30th, 1995. So not too long after, not even 6 months after the White Zone, they released a Hawkwind album. This being their 20th studio album as a Hawkwind studio album. So I guess the other one is more like a First Warriors studio album. So I included it just because I think it's important to see that Hawkwind wasn't just always Hawkwind. Sometimes they were the Hawk Lords, sometimes they were the Church of Hawkwind, sometimes they were the Psychedelic Warriors, and I think there was one particular album that originally was supposed to be a David Brock solo album, but the record label decided they wanted to release it as a Hawkwind album. So anyways, Aliens 4, released October 30th, 1995. So they do have a vocalist on this that they got into the band, Ron Tree. He does the vocals. Then you have Brock, Davey, Chadwick, and Jerry Richards also on guitar here. It opens with that kind of spacey sound. It sounds like it's taking off. It almost has this kind of, there's a part in it that almost has this Star Trek feel to it. They have this kind of a data sound bit going on here. Yeah, you'll notice it right away when you hear it. Lots of narration again, some quirky sounds, a couple of heavy space tracks. So a pretty standard kind of Hawkwind album, like with its heavy guitar parts, with its spacey sound, its quirky noises, its narratives. All these things are common Hawkwind stuff, so this to me fits well within that. So they probably in their mind had the idea, though, they wanted to do this White Zone album, which is really outside of the Hawkwind kind of sound. So they gave it that Psychedelic Warrior sound, and then they came back almost immediately with a Hawkwind album to appease their fans, more than likely. Hopefully that's their idea. So the next track, the next album out, came out almost 2 years later, Distant Horizons, released November the 3rd, 1997. Brock, Richards, Chadwick, and Tree are on this album. This is their 21st studio album. You know, most bands are getting to that now, and these guys are 20 years in the past and are already getting into it. Lots of sound and soundscapes here. Very heavy guitar, spacey as hell. And there are some punky elements to this album as well, which is not something unusual for them. They've had albums in the past before this one where they had that kind of punky feel to their music. A lot of punk bands cite this band as being a little bit of an influence to them. This is an atypical Hawkwind album, I believe. So if you like those atypical Hawkwind albums, you'll like this one. The next one out came out 2 years later. In Your Area, it's called. Released January the 5th, 1999. So the last album for the century, for the 20th century, by Hawkwind. Brock, Richards, Tree, Chadwick, all on this album, their 22nd studio album. The vocals are more frontal here. I think he really upped his vocal game here. So it's not that his vocals are stronger. I don't think they're stronger. They just put out front a little bit more on this particular album. It's got that plenty of Hawkwind, heavy, spacey sound to it. This is the album, a little bit of that reggae stuff going on again here. A little bits apart in that song, in the song Brainstorm. You're going to hear a little bit of that reggae sound going on. And some punky parts as well. Not as many, but a little bit on this album as well. So this was the last album released by them. Even though I wrote 98, it was actually released in 99. So this is the last album for the 20th century released by them. I think I've also stopped at this point talking about their live albums because they continue to release them. I just wanted to give you a kind of idea that in between their albums, they're always releasing these live albums. And when they had longer stretches between the studio albums, they were releasing a lot of live albums. But generally speaking, they almost consistently release live albums fairly regularly. The next album out in the year 2000, October 2000. This is Brock, Chadwick again, and Crumb on keyboards. Bino Jameson, and he did the kind of the synthesizer sequence part. Sorry, I was trying to see if I wrote his name right, and I did. Robert Swift and Des Walker. So Bino Jameson, Robert Swift, Des Walker, all doing synthesizers and sequencers on this album. Lots of that on this album. This was the album that it's called Space Brock. So it was originally supposed to be a David Brock solo album, but the band decided to, or not the band, but I think probably the label decided they wanted to release it as a Hawkwind album. So it's a very there's a lot of synthesizer sounds here, a lot of electronic sounds, lots of space effects sounds. It's very spacey, this album, one of the most spacey of them all. There are some really heavy tracks on this album as well, but not as many. This is more dominated by that synthesizer sound than the traditional Hawkwind sound, but again, that Hawkwind sound is still on this album. So the next album out will be the last album for this part. I decided to split it into 3 parts because there are another 11 albums after this, so I wanted to give them each their due. I didn't want to rush it. I didn't realize there was that many after I did the first part. I thought that I was halfway through, and then I realized, oh my God, there's like twice as many as I thought. So anyways, the next album came out in 2005, a lengthy time between studio albums, like 5 years. That's like an eternity for Hawkwind. The album's called Take Me to Your Leader, released September the 12th, 2005. Brock, Davey, Chadwick again. James Clemes on organ, Matthew Wright on vocals, Jez Huggard on saxophone as well on this album. Jason Stewart keyboards, Simon House keyboards, violin, Arthur Brown vocals, Len Lovage vocals, Lemmy vocals, and bass, and then you got Phil Cohen on guitar. So basically what's happened here is they've released a studio album with new stuff, but they've also redid some of the stuff from their earlier albums, some of their earlier albums going back to the time of Lemmy even, and incorporated them into this. So that's why you have all this length of musicians who actually didn't actually play on the album, but played in the past, and they re-recorded some of this stuff. Lots of strange noises. This is one of their better album covers as well. It's a pretty interesting looking album cover. Again, released on September the 12th, 2005. They have, of course, at this point, it's been 5 years since their studio album, but they've been continuously again releasing live and compilation albums throughout this period of time. So it's not like they're not doing anything, and they tour all the time too as well. So that will be it for this week's episode. We have 11 more albums for Part C. This is a most prolific band. I knew when I took this on that it was going to be a lengthy project. I don't know how I originally thought I was going to squeeze all this into one episode. Once I started getting it going, though, I realized that it was going to be lengthy, but very interesting, and it's been good for me because I've gotten to listen to all of the Hawkwind albums now, from front to back, and I wouldn't say I'm familiar with their sound throughout the entire thing, but I wouldn't say I know all the albums. It takes a long time to get to know 33 or 34 albums. In this case, I think it's like 35 albums. That's a lot of albums. And then they got another 20 or 22 live albums, and then they got maybe another half dozen or more compilations, and then you've got some outliers like the Psychedelic Warriors, and so I don't know how many albums this band as a group have put out, but I don't think it's far-reaching to say between 75 and 100 albums. That's a lot. Even Rick Wakeman would be hard-pressed to keep up with that, I think. Anyways, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Exploring the Prog Verse, featuring Hawkwind. This is the Part B. I'm sorry it didn't come out last night, but I wouldn't have been able to do it justice trying to rush it to get it together just to put it out. I'd rather delay it and put it out the way it is going to be put out now, and I hope you enjoy this episode. If you did, please like and subscribe. That's much appreciated. Don't forget to make your comments about any of the albums. There may be things that I've said that you said, oh, you forgot this, or you didn't include that, or maybe you got that mixed up with that, or something like that. That's all fine. You want to put that in the comment section. Absolutely is good. I'm trying to get accurate as I can, because like they say, there's only one truth, but some people see the truth clearer than others, right? So please hit the notification bell so you don't miss any more of the content. and we'll be back. I'm going to release the last episode next week. I wasn't going to do it. I was going to take the week off and then start metal, but we'll release that next week, and then I'll start metal at its normal time the following week, which means there'll be no break between the two shows, unfortunately, but that's just the way it happened to work out because of the lengthy discography of Hawkwind. The next discography for metal will be is going to be Black Sabbath, which is fairly lengthy as well, but I'm 100% more familiar with the Black Sabbath albums, except for the Tony Martin era, which I have a little familiarity with, but I'm not. So I will have to listen to that era quite a bit just to get more familiar with it. But we'll be doing Black Sabbath for metal when it comes out, so that will be, of course, 2 weeks away. And the last Hawkwind episode will come out next week. So I hope I covered everything and didn't forget anything. And I hope to see you all this week. So take care and have yourself a good day. Goodbye.